All right. Hi, everyone.
Yay!
Welcome to our panel, City
Hi!
Dreams, Life as an Indie Game Developer in NYC. My name is Kati, and I will be hosting this panel. I'm the co-founder of Computer Lunch, a mobile game studio here in the city, and I'm currently the studio art director at Dots. They made a mobile game called Two Dots that's pretty popular. Let me introduce everyone to the panel. Ted Park is a freelance producer. He worked on games at Sundown, Shots in the Dark, and Cell.
Oh, just breaking up. Well, we don't need our intros, right? I mean,
Did yours go through, Ted?
no, I think I just heard
No.
astronaut noises. So
All right, great. That's how I roll. Well, Ted, I'll keep it short. Ted's a freelance producer, and he worked on the games at Sundown and Cell to Singularity, and he is currently produced Wild Beast. Sam Eng, I'm just going to rush through these and get to the good stuff. Sam is an independent game developer, and his first title, Zarvat, is out on Nintendo Switch, and he's currently working on Skate Story, and that's a game about skateboarding down into the underworld, and it's been getting a lot of love. Mary Georgescu is a first-generation American-Romanian narrative game designer and streamer. I love your hair, by the way. It looks fabulous.
Thank you.
He founded Hideout LLC and is currently self-publishing 2 tabletop role-playing game zines. I definitely have questions about that. And is the hardware engineer and lead artist demoing Picklock, an alternate controller lock-picking game at this year's Play NYC. Let's begin. Sorry for the bad reception, but we'll make it happen. Why games? What made you choose this industry of all possible ways to use your talents? And whoever wants to answer, just jump in.
You choose the thing that makes you the happiest, but also makes you die on the inside. Fulfillment and pain all together. Honestly, it's for I approach games from a narrative perspective, so that's what my heart and soul is in games for. Storytelling.
Nice. What about you,
okay.
Sam?
Oh,
Or go for it.
all right. I'll just go for it. So I did go to college for video games, because my generation just decided, oh, you can go to college for video games. So I kind of just started that path, and then yeah, I've been here ever since.
Yeah, I think for me, games were like the main form of media that I consumed. Like I didn't really watch TV or movies or anything. I just like played a lot of video games when I was a kid. And then the only reason I really got into video game creation was I would frequent all these like video game websites like Rock Paper Shotgun. And I remember seeing this game made by this creator named Increpare, or Stephen Lavelle, who like produced games like English Country Tune, or more recently like Steven Sausage Roll. But he would make all these like really tiny free games, and they would all be released with like made with Unity, made with Unity, and made with Unity 2, made with Unity 3, and I was like, oh, this is cool. So I eventually like picked it up, downloaded Unity, and sort of got into it that way.
Nice. Well, Sam, since you were talking about your inspiration, You put out a game on Switch, Sarvat. Everyone get it. It's beautiful and fun. What
Ted
did you
also put
learn
out a
from?
game on Switch.
I'm sorry.
Ted also put out a game on Switch too.
Yeah. So, what did you learn from that? Was it harder or easier than you thought?
I think the parts that I thought were going to be hard, like coding or art, they were hard, but not nearly as hard as like all the other periphery surrounding it. I thought the periphery would be like really easy. Like, oh yeah, just once you get the dev kit, then you're done. But there's so much stuff that goes into actually releasing a game, and then also even trying to make a living out of it is a whole other question that is, I mean, a lot of indies struggle with that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a whole can of worms that I'm going to have some more questions on in a second. Ted, you got a publisher for your game right out of school at Sundown. So, how do you think your experience was affected by having a partner right after graduating?
Uh, I'd say yeah, it's kind of crazy because I don't think I would have released this game like on this commercial scale if it wasn't for the publisher. So basically, we just kind of just got funding to be able to work on the game for like about 2 years, just right out of college. So it was yeah, it was a crazy experience. And the nice thing about having a publisher is you don't have to worry about like all the random stuff that Sam probably had to deal with. Like I could just focus on making the game with a team instead of like asking Nintendo like, hey, can I get a Switch dev kit or and then keep bugging them for that. But yeah, I think I just kind of got like a bigger kind of perspective on like what like the games industry is and like what kind of like the expectations are. Um, and it was kind of we were able to kind of make the game like a bigger scale than we normally would be.
Was
Just
there any
because,
specific help that you got in addition to being able to just focus on your part of the work that you learned from it? You mentioned perspective, so that sounds pretty interesting.
yeah. If I had to list out all the stuff, we got marketing support. We got the game ported to all the different platforms. We we actually got the art redone. So the characters in the game aren't like what they normally were. We just kind of let the publisher kind of help redesign them. And then on top of that, there's like all the kind of management work. Just being able to put the game on all the platforms, having like a nice website. Um, yeah, it's kind of just like getting a partner to kind of that knows like what's needed to kind of market a game and have them do all that work instead of you trying to figure it out yourself.
Cool. Mary, you were part of the NYU Game Incubator program. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? And then also, I'm curious how the environment of the school is different from other communities around gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. So the incubator is about 3 months long. Um, it's very hard to get into. You pretty much have to have not only a solid plan, but also um, you have to already sort of have like an audience space and stuff. So what we got into the incubator for is a game called Nothing to See Here, which is a card game that we have been working on for almost 2 years. Um, Now we're basically taking it from the, I guess, perspective of students, where we were gung ho about the design of it and more, I guess, ethereal elements that we really loved, and bringing it into like a commercial space and making it commercially viable with the support of a lot of professionals, sort of along the same lines of like marketing help and playtesting advice. It's a really beautiful, supportive community, and we've sort of received nothing but love, not only from the people that are working with us, but also from like past incubator goers who have had their share of experiences. So it's a lot of work, but it's some of the. I think it was a blessing to have to work on this project with the team that I had during the summer, because it really gave us something to focus on instead of um, worrying about what's going on outside, to be quite honest. So not only do we get to work towards kickstarting a game for this fall, but also we're just surrounded by people on Zoom calls every single day. So it's quite special, I think.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with all the non-gaming things or the ancillary gaming things that you've been involved with. So you ran successful Kickstarter campaigns, you're streaming, you're publishing zines. Like, can you talk a little bit about sort of what doing these things that are not just game dev have taught you about connecting to an audience?
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of grounds you. So I talked a little bit about how I'm coming at it from a storytelling perspective. Um, that being that I think there are a lot of people that have not told their stories yet, or are not able to connect with a lot of the commercial narratives. So being in an indie space is a rare opportunity to say, like, hey, I have a really weird um, story of how I came to be an artist, how I came to be a game developer, and using your voice, you can encourage others to open up their minds and say, oh, I can sort of do this too. So by not solely focusing on one material, not only does it make my game development stronger, but it branches out and expands the possibilities for everyone else that I come in contact with too. And that's definitely where I thrive, is that experimental space. So it's because I started with fine art, but uh, yeah, it's just an ongoing learning process for me. Um,
Yes, Sam, I see that you've been very active on social media in the last few months. Quarantine does not seem to have slowed you down. I'd also be curious, in a similar vein, how sort of reaching out beyond sort of the opening up Unity and working on the actual game, if at all, if that's changed your perspective on how to design it or what things to consider when putting it together.
Yeah, no, that's a super good question. I think I've heard of a lot of other designers even trying to design games based on how, I mean, I hate the word, but how gifable the game is. Luckily, the game I'm working on, the Skate Story, is like really gifable. Like you can look at it for like 5 seconds and be like, "Oh, it looks pretty cool." And I've heard of other game designers even not even making the game, like literally producing GIFs with no gameplay whatsoever behind it, and then almost like focus testing the game idea by creating a 5 second GIF and posting it on Twitter and seeing how many likes and retweets it gets, versus building a whole prototype, building all the art, building all the gameplay mechanics, and then making a GIF. And then so it's interesting that it's even taken that sort of turn for some people. For me, I try to when I'm designing like new gameplay mechanics in the game, I'm always like thinking of how it would present, like say in a trailer or on Twitter, or even just like if somebody's playing the game, you would want um, at almost any moment someone else to look at and be like, oh, that looks fun, right? That looks great. So really trying to think of that is, I mean, the strength of my game right now is like in the visual, like the visual hook is like pretty strong. This obviously wouldn't work as well for like a strategy game, just or a like super narrative focused game. It's just sort of a different market there as well.
It's fascinating. So I actually would love to hear everyone describe the projects they're currently working on. Some of you touched already a little bit on it, but I think it's a good place to just share with the viewers what you're currently excited about and why that one. How has your project evolved since you started working on it? Ted, do you want to start?
I'm focusing on the project called Life, trying to figure out how to survive during these times. Um,
It's a big project.
yeah. Just turned 25 last month, so I'm trying to figure that out.
Quarter century.
Yeah. um, I am working on a couple prototypes here and there, but nothing really concrete at the moment, unfortunately. But that is kind of it's nice that Sam mentioned that, because I do think nowadays it's like you can kind of just release like a prototype and kind of just see like how it does before you actually work on it. You can kind of just like track like, oh, like they like this GIF, so maybe I should just like continue working on this project. And that's probably like the strategy I'll go with my next project. Especially since the last big project at Sundown, the main point of that game is like you're invisible like 90% of the time, so that's really hard to like convey through GIF. So that's like one thing I kind of wish we like fixed before we released it. But yeah, you live and learn. So yeah, sorry I don't have any projects to share right now, but hopefully within the next couple months I'll have more to
Was there
share.
apps though, right? Like working on creative things, it's actually huge boon to have a project you love enough and that you can get traction with to actually work on. Part of this panel, I think, is to illuminate both the parts that just kind of flow and also to allude to that it's pretty difficult sometimes to get to that point too. There's many media, graveyard littered with many projects that never made it. I think that's actually also a pretty Mary.
Yeah. So, oh geez. Okay, I kind of heard it, and I kind of got the cue, so I'm gonna go for it. So I'm currently, what I was demoing for Play this year is actually a physical lockpicking game that I made with Connor Carson called Picklock. I have our baby prototype with me. So it's a physical controller that you can basically like play and unlock a puzzle, and it's sort of like it's an action game right now. And we got a lot of funding for that, but as it is a physical controller, same sort of difficulty with the card game that we're publishing right now. The challenge was, okay, so we can't show it in person. But we're really excited about it, and we had so much good feedback from playtesters. We've really sort of nailed down the mechanics of like using picks without it being actually picklocking. So there's something really special there, and we want to continue working on it in the future, but maybe not right now. The game that we are kickstarting in September is actually attached to my Twitter as well. That is a card game, a party card game, that talks about some really interesting subject matter and is pretty racy, and I love it a lot. And I'm still fulfilling my Kickstarters, so I'm a Gemini, what can I say? I have multiple projects going. That's how I live. I can't not work.
What's the name of it so people can find it?
Absolutely. It's currently with Eat Melon Studio, so at Eat Melon Studio on Twitter. And the game is called Nothing to See Here! ! It's kind of hard to make a Twitter handle for it, so it's just under Eat Melon right now. But yeah, if you're interested, definitely go sign up for our newsletter. We're gonna have some gameplay footage later on in August that's gonna be really funny, and you'll see why it's worth the wait. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
So switching gears a little bit, you're all indie devs, so I gotta ask, how do you make time to work on your game?
Yeah,
unemployment
that's a great
checks.
question.
I've free.
Yeah, I mean
Uh,
the real question that I hear is like, well, money uh, is the real answer there. Where to make time, you have to have money, especially in New York, to live, right? So um, having a job, unfortunately, you're kind of trading time for money there. Um, so actually, a lot. So I'm part of this game collective called Gumbo, which is based in Dumbo, New York, and so Computer Lunch is actually based there. Um, I'm there right now, actually. So you kind of see. And a lot of Gumbo members have odd work situations. It's very hard to be, unfortunately, it's very hard to be a Gumbo member when you have a full-time job, because you have a full-time job. You're spending 8 hours a day somewhere else doing things. So for me and for a lot of other Gumbo members, we make ends meet by doing freelance work or part-time work, or having a remote job, which luckily nowadays it seems like most jobs are going remote, which is good. So hopefully that continues on. But for me personally, I have a second company called Thousand Ant, which produces Unity tutorials, like for clients such as Unity, Microsoft, working with Oculus. So we're kind of like, a lot of my time is spent doing things that, have to pay the bills, and the rest of the time I try to dedicate as much as I can into creation of, you know, of games.
What about you, Mary?
Yeah, so I sort of run on grant funding and scholarships, and I try to find opportunities where I can to not be working full time if it's like a big project. In the past, I've usually only worked part time jobs, but now that I'm sort of getting into the swing of things, I'll probably, and I am currently, like looking for full time stuff. So I think I've gotten the hang of it over the years, because I founded my studio in 2017, working like 3 or 4 part time jobs to scrape the money together to make it happen. But it was important to me, and now it's here. So now it's never going to go away. So that's always going to be something that I have. That's yeah, that's always going to be something that I'm working towards.
And here's a provocative one. How do you all define indie? Since the panel has indie games in the title, and I'm just curious. Do you think this is something related to the size of the team, the platform, the philosophy? Is this a relevant or an irrelevant label? This is something I'd love to hear from each one of you. Maybe Ted, if you want to start.
um, yeah, nowadays it's like indie games can get publishers, which kind of was like originally it meant like, oh, you like independent meant you didn't have a publisher, but now it's like, oh, now there's like indie publishers. I'd say personally, I kind of define it as, um, if you have like a small team, like 1 to like 20 people, I consider that indie. Although now there's things get complicated with like contractors and stuff like that. Um, I think a more like broader like statement I think is if someone just like just like a small group of people just has like a vision of like a game, and they try to like deliver in like with their own like limited resources, instead of like it being like, oh, there's like a panel of people that like come together and they're like, all right, how can we make like $1 million? Let's, all right, idle clicker games, or like dating sims or something like that. Like we'll just gather all these resources and just make like the most addictive game possible. Like I think it's just like you kind of try to be like a little bit more pure than that, not solely just for the money, but you're just trying to like, oh, I want to just like make a cool game.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, indie has so much context behind it and so many different opinions behind it. I mean, technically, Valve is indie, right? Like they are independently owned and they don't really have anyone to call to, but also, you know, they're huge. So there's sort of a part of indie where it's like has to be small. You know, like when we think of indie, it's like small, kind of scraping by. Um, but I really do see it like more of a spectrum. Like there are like indie games where it's like, you know, one person in their bedroom scraping together something in Game Maker Studio. Um, all the way up to like AAA, right? But then there's like indie games, which we can say like Hollow Knight or Celeste, or smaller titles like Part Play NYC, or even some people try to stratify that more and have triple I games or double I games, right? Where it's like triple I is like it's an indie game, but it's got like sizable funding. So that way it makes really small indies compared to that like quite, you know, at least we feel like we're in a different league. Like a game such as like Inside, Playdead's Inside is indie for sure. But it also had millions of dollars in funding and a team of over 20 people and direct support from Unity, a custom build of Unity. So it's hard to completely categorize you know, Playdead's Inside, which is a seminal indie title, and I love it, in the same vein as like Zarvat, like my game, right? Like made by one person in a bedroom. It seems I like the distinction of having like indie levels in a way, like a triple I game or double I game, or just like a bedroom indie game.
What about you, Mary?
Yeah, I think for me, when I hear the word indie, I think of games that are really pushing boundaries. So I think of um, POC and trans game developers that are really like doing something special and something unique in the space. Um, and they don't necessarily like care about what is mainstream. They care about narrative. They care about telling a different story, doing something differently. Um, so that's sort of what I think of indie as, a space where people can grow and develop without thinking of those constraints of a larger consumer market.
So kind of connected to this, how do you define success?
The question,
Yeah, so
I'm just repeating it because it was a little. Did you say how did you define success?
Yes.
Ted, were you going to say something?
no, it's just cool that I got to release a commercial game outside school. So I guess that was the first success.
Yeah.
I think you have multiple levels of success. So now it's like, all right, um, can I make a game that can actually like fund the next game? You know, and then I think for most people actually that's probably like the main defining def- defining feature of success is, you know, I can make this game and it's as close to how I want it as possible, and then it makes like money so that I can make the next game that's like that.
That's tough.
So
Yeah.
this is a question about success.
Yeah, you define it.
How do you define it? Um, Having a game be complete and in the hands of someone or playable on itch, perfect. That's success.
It, I really like this question because I actually think about this a lot, like almost constantly. Like, what do I actually think of success for my game? Sometimes I waver between like, oh, success means I make $1 million, right? I mean, I would feel pretty successful if that happened, but also success might be like just releasing the game, or it might be that one person, it's the perfect game for this one person, and it really affected this one person's life. So, I mean, to be quite frank, like maybe I'm a little greedy, but I feel like it's kind of like a combination or spectrum between that. Like, I want to, I want my work to touch people and for it to really mean a lot to them. But I also want to make a lot of money. So I think there are definitely like various levels of success. I would consider my game a success if I made a decent chunk of cash. I was able to ship it, and some people like it, and I've sort of marked that for Skate Story as like that would be a successful game for me.
Yeah, it's certainly it's kind of a question about the how to make time, right? It's sort of there's a push pull with freedom and listening to the audience. Speaking of the audience, I want to take audience questions, but I am unable to access the questions. So, all right.
Does someone else have to stream up?
Yeah, I have the stream up. Uh,
Sorry, I'm being given a commercial break here. All right, great. I'm looking at us and I'm seeing. Oh, what's the greatest challenge of being an indie dev in 2020? That last part being a bit of a curveball.
not going completely insane while you can't see people. Yeah, I do kind of like miss the face-to-face interactions I used to have with fellow indie game devs. That's been kind of rough, but we try our best to replace it with Discord, just chatting each other up on Discord, and I guess things like this too.
Anyone
I think,
else?
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think for myself, since indie is such a small like community, and then it's even more pocketed off. I think there's still the concern for safety and knowing who you're surrounded by, and I think that's a daily challenge that we're slowly trying to figure out, but it is still a present thing. So, yeah.
I have a very specific question that I guess would be for Ted or Sam, which is how do you start a relationship with a publisher? Cold calling, and that question came from Sam Annabo. I think I said that right. How do you get it started?
I mean,
For
I can.
yeah, Sam, go ahead.
I'll go ahead with just so I would say I can only speak to the starting part. I am technically a publisher because I publish my own game, but I have been talking to some publishers for Skate Story, and yeah, cold calls actually work sometimes. So the hardest part about the cold call is, well, if you have a really visually striking game, it works really well because you include the GIF and then they open it and they're like, "This is great." But it also really helped because I cold called a couple publishers I was interested in right before PAX East, which is like the last convention before the pandemic kind of hit us. And I asked a bunch of publishers to come onto my booth, which I paid a handsome sum for, but that created a very easy, simple, and convenient atmosphere for the publishers to come visit your game. So I tried to make it as easy as possible for them to see the game, try the game, and like the game. And then also another thing to note is if you're planning on like pitching a game, like generally publishers will look at your pitch. Like I don't think you actually have to like worry that they will not look at your pitch because that's their job. Their job is to look at your pitch. So you might not get a response back, but like just work on getting a really choose the right publisher and kind of send the correct email to wherever they accept pitches, and they will look at it. Like they don't get that many games.
No, they
So
probably
question
do get a lot of games,
from
but
Nick. So just moving on to a question from Mary. How do you go about acquiring grants and applying for booth space at events like Play NYC? I'm putting it towards you because you mentioned grants earlier, and I'm sure that there is a lot of interest in that particular avenue.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of state sites that constantly post for the arts. More so now, they're looking at sort of mixed media and more digital work, so it's not just traditional anymore. So those are some avenues, but also following specific foundations that work with video games. There are a ton out there, and I would love to help you out if you want to like message me later at Mary Makes Games. Always happy to help because it's hard to search. So I know the struggle. And in terms of affording booth space, I eat that cost. So I got to work throughout the year to be able to afford it. But for me, it is worth every single penny to be able to meet someone who might 1 year down the line, 5 years down the line, be like, hey, I played that game with you. That connection is like priceless to me. So yeah.
Then it
Also, that requires research, by the way. So happy to help there too.
So 1,900 people who hope that not everyone takes you up on it. That's, but I love that.
I hope it's one or two, but what can I say if 19 people need it?
A question from Blade Master Rush. What do you guys think, guys and lady, think about Twitch One's marketing strategies such as ones by Valorant? Is Twitch integration into your games a priority now, given the success of games such as Dead Cells?
I do think like kind of having like sort of like a beta period where like you just like slowly kind of give out keys can potentially generate hype, but generally I don't think really indies can do that. I think you have to be kind of like a big company. But it is something, you know, part of being like an indie, the nice thing about being indie is you can kind of try out all these different marketing strategies and kind of like see what sticks.
And Blade Master Rush has another question. Do you think that conventions should be done in VR rather than in person due to the advent of the coronavirus? What are your stances on freedom of avatar choice in VR? Do you think that could create issues in a virtual gaming convention? Wow, that's a lot of questions.
That's a deep question. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's actually a really really deep and good question. Like there are like legitimate concerns about VR avatars and harassment in VR. I'm not a huge VR aficionado, to be honest, but I find it a little interesting, like reading about it, like people feeling unsafe in VR due to the actions of other players, because it's very visceral, right? Like when you actually see someone there messing with you, and it's I think it's definitely something that needs to be accounted for. That being said, I know also that there are lots of companies trying to do VR conventions, and there's a couple of problems with that. I'm not saying that it won't happen, but a few problems is that not many people have a VR headset. And that is like a massive barrier to entry already. I think we'll eventually get there. Like conventions in like Fortnite and Minecraft are probably way easier to do, and we'll have better results, IMO. But someone will make a VR convention.
There is just really quick, Amaze Berlin did something like that. It might not necessarily have been VR or AR, but but it was public avatars in an exhibition space, and I thought they did it pretty solid. So
A question from Dean the Disaster. Do you find indie game receptive to progressive content? For example, tackling race, LGBT content, etc.? Or do you think it's experiencing the same backlash against putting politics in games? Great question.
wait, games are political?
I'd say in general, I think indies are. I think it's fine for indies to kind of tackle content like that. Just because the reality is, like, most indie games aren't big enough that you'll like get like a wide enough audience that you'll have like people that you'll have like the extremists try and like push against it. I personally speaking, we had like one like website just like talk about like, oh, if you guys don't like diversity in your games, you probably shouldn't play this one. But that was literally just like one article out of like hundreds of articles that have been written about our game. So I don't think you need to worry about that. And I think probably that's a good thing about indies too, is you can kind of just like cater to like a specific audience. You don't have to like try to be as big as possible to try and cater to like everyone, because I imagine there's just so much that goes on with that, just like taking out like specific storylines because like they're like, oh, we don't want to offend people. So
Anyone else have thoughts on this?
I mean, just be you. Be unabashedly you. There's always going to be people that don't like what you're making. That's just the nature of making content to begin with. You need a circle of people that you can surround yourself with that will like keep you going and keep you positive. But overall, in the long run, those like one or two people are not going to be anything to you, as opposed to getting your voice out there. So don't let them hold you back.
Okay, I have a feeling we lost her.
I think Kati froze again.
Yeah, I think her internet is basically in and out. So I'm waiting to see if she comes back. Here she's back.
Panel to take a minute of advice to aspiring gamers or indies for their journey.
So she's asking for you guys to give advice to anyone.
So Kati, you broke up there a bit, but I think the question was, what advice would you give to aspiring game developers who are starting their journey? I guess I'll just start there. I would say that the most difficult part in making video games is like just really knowing where you're trying to go for it. Like, I think there's so many different paths that you can take. Like I kind of took the role of like, oh, I want to be like a solo indie developer. But I know a lot of great people who, for example, want to get into game music, or want to be a game producer, or want to be a game artist. And indie game studios have these roles. They're very, I mean, to be honest, they are very competitive to get into. But I think finding that goal, that like marker of where you're actually trying to end up, it gets you a decent way there. And you can change it. Like, you can always like be like, well, I thought I wanted to be a solo indie developer, but actually I just want to be a programmer. Or actually I just want to make assets for the asset store, right? Like, you can kind of shift your thing, but I found that having a goal really sets you further along into success. Like, because then you sort of have a direction to go into. And I would say the number one thing that you should do is define what role you would want in a studio. And maybe it ends up where you have to do everything. but hopefully we can get there. Oh, sorry.
I'm sure to get Mary and Ted.
Oh, sorry.
There.
Ted, do you wanna go and I'll add the last comment.
Yeah, sure. I'd say just make a game and kind of just see if you're right for this, because the reality is like making a game is probably one of the hardest things you can do, just like in life. So you have to like kind of know if it's like even right for you, and I'd say just like make a game, release it, and then like see if after like all that blood was shed, like see if you're like crazy enough to want to like do it again.
I guess to just close it off, redefine what game means. It does not have to be what is commercially available or what you see currently. What does a game mean to you? Make that thing. It does not have to follow a format.
I am not sure how to pass the, but I want to thank the panelists for taking time and sharing their hard-won and insights with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.